Now, just before we move on to you, John, of course, your friendship with Jimmy Galway has lasted for many years.
Oh, yes.
How did you get together?
Well, we were in the same orchestra together in the Royal Philharmonic. He was a flautist, he was the first flautist, and I was a backdash fiddle player. And I got to know him then, and we got on very well, you see, because we were both from the same background, you know. Jimmy's father, as you know, was a dock worker like myself, and we got on like a house of fire.
So when did he commission this work from you?
Oh, many years ago, when Jimmy was just a flautist. I was doing a concert at Cheltenham, and Jimmy came along there, and of course he was then, even then, a fantastic flautist, marvelous. And I always wanted to write something for him. And I remember talking to Michael Emerson, who's our mutual manager, and I said, I was just going to pick up the phone. I said, Mike, I'd like to. He said, I know what. Why don't you write a concerto for Jimmy? I said, yes, I'd love to. And that's how it started.
And he became a superstar after that.
Yeah.
Perhaps you're responsible. Let's go back. It's a long, long way from Calcutta to concertos for pieces of music for Jimmy Galway and playing for the Royal Philharmonic. What was your background like?
Very hard, very hard. I mean, I was born in a very poor sort of background where even to be a musician, I mean, when my father was a really tough dock worker, when he heard that I was going to be a musician, he said, Mike, what, my son going to be a sissy? So he forced me to take up boxing. So I learned boxing. It was a very rough, hard background. But I heard that I was born in the Mohammedan area of Calcutta, and I heard these marvelous sounds like the tabla, and you know, and that was in my blood. But then, when I was about 7 or 8, I studied Western music, you know, and then I was lucky enough at the age of 13 to meet a wonderful Indian musician called Sanatan Mukherjee, who told me, he says, the only way you can do it is to bridge the two techniques, the Indian and the Western. So I studied Indian music from him.
Let me take you back a bit now. Yeah. You say you're interested in Western music at the age of 7 and 8.
Yeah, 7 and 8.
Now, how does a person from your background get involved, A, in music in general, but particularly an alien, not alien, but certainly a very distinct and different culture,
yes.
the European tradition?
Yes, you see, but, this is very, very funny. I don't know how the wheels of God work, but you see, my father's auntie, my great-grandaunt, she worked as a servant in an English family, you see, as a servant. And in this family, they had a violin which nobody used. And I must have shown some, I don't know how they say, I must have shown some inclination for music. So she begged that these people, these English people, look, I have a great-grandson, he likes to, do you mind if I have this? So they gave her the violin. And that's how I took it. Then, of course, there was a very fine teacher in Calcutta, a man called Philippe Sandre. And of course, my mother wanted me to go and learn from him, but we had no money, you see. So she, I don't know how, she walked around the school of music, and in the end she went in there in desperation, look, I have a son, would you teach him? He's only 8 years of age. And he said, well, bring him along. And I went along and I played to him. He must have been impressed, because then he taught me. Then, of course, when I was about 13 or 14, the great violinist, who's Zubin Mehta's father, Mehdi Mehta, he came. Mind you, I've never paid for my lessons, so he was living in a posh area of Calcutta. So I thought to myself, I must learn. You know, so I went to him, knocked at the door, and there Mehdi Mehta came out. He said, yes. I said, will you teach me, please? He said, of course, my boy. And of course, he's a marvelous man. And of course, he taught me. And he was the one that really, when the scholarship, there was a competition in Bombay. I went out to Bombay, and he helped me, because it was a competition for violin playing. Because in India, and they laughed when I said I was going to be a composer. So who's ever heard of an Indian composer, you see? So I won the scholarship on this instrument, the violin.
I'm glad you said all that, because it intrigued me that they were from one of those poverty-stricken backgrounds you can find in the world, apart from certain desert areas of Africa. And yet you managed to get very, very fine training.
Yes.
But how did you get from Bombay to this country?
Well, there was, I saw advertisement in the Statesman of Calcutta saying that anybody who could at the age, I think 17 or 16 or 17, under the age of that, there's a competition for anybody who could enter for this, you know, if you're good enough, and you must have a certain thing. So I wrote off, and they said, fine, you're within the age limit, come along to Bombay and enter for this competition. That was all very well. Now, how was I going to get the train fare? So I went around with cap in hand to all my friends, and one fellow put 1 rupee, another somebody else put 8 annas, and you know, and I got it in those days. I think it was about 21 or 30 rupees to go third class. So I went third class with my fiddle tucked under my arm and my just one shirt and trousers. I went third class, and of course to travel, if you've never travelled third class in India, you haven't travelled. You have to travel with. I mean, this is going back in those days. I don't know what it's like now, because now it's probably different. You travel with the goats, the snakes. I remember getting out of the Chicago port, 2 o'clock in the morning. There was a tremendous hullabaloo. I said, Kya? And of course, there's a man, a snake charmer, had got her to the train. And everybody fled.
This is not a very auspicious beginning for an internationally known composer. But what's interesting to me is all the references you've made from the time you were a very small child until this experience going to Bombay is your single-mindedness. Now, what motivated you throughout all this? Were you just so determined, or was it some greater sense of your own worth or ambition?
Well, I always wanted to be a composer. I always wanted to be a composer. And I always had this vision. I didn't know how I was going to do it at the age of 9, 10, 11. I always wanted to make a fusion of these two techniques. I've always had that. I don't know how. I always wanted to make this fusion. And the only way, even at that time, I thought the only way to make this fusion is to have an equal knowledge of the two techniques.
Eastern and Western
Eastern
music.
and Western. Which means that if you had a greater knowledge of Eastern music, then of course it's going to be mostly Eastern orientated, or vice versa.
Well, let me ask you about the Eastern instruments, because we've seen some of your work in the past. I remember in the 60s you worked with jazz musicians using Eastern and Western cultures or techniques. But what is difficult for a lot of people, and has been for me in the past, has been that Indian music has represented an almost unfathomable shape and size. It's a puzzle.
Yes.
Don't quite know how to penetrate it. So perhaps you'd explain what some
Yes,
of
you
those
see,
instruments are.
it shouldn't, Trevor. You see, Indian music is purely linear. You know, that means there is no harmony in Indian music. The only harmony is provided by an instrument called the tampura, which we'll come to, drone. Now, in India, most of Indian melody, because India is melodic and rhythmic. And because of the absence of harmony, the melody takes great decoration. Very decorative, the melody is. Now, an Indian music is built on scales. They say there are 132 scales. But one particular instrumentalist does not learn all those 132 scales. It's like a violinist who only learns a few concertos and goes around. So, now, and they talk about Indian music being improvisory. Now, Indian music is disciplined improvisation, in as far as the notes of the scale go up in one way and they come down in another way. Let's take, for example, the Raga Multani, which we play. Look, the whole scale is, but it goes up like this. There are 5 notes going up and the whole scale comes down.
So the discipline comes in certain sequences of notes, the catchphrase.
That's right, what they call the pakhad. You see? Now this, as opposed to another raga, you see? Now,
well, let me just interrupt you there for a second, because you're demonstrating here on a Western European
instrument,
whereas we have the real thing over there. Can we hear from some of those?
Before, we see how there is one instrument in India which is called the tanpura. You see, the tampura provides that canvas of Indian sound. Now, let's play this on the piano with the tampura. Sheila will play the tampura. Now, listen to this. How the piano sounds like an Indian instrument. It gives that. It's because the tampura, you see these jivali taras, the threads, and it comes from the word jiva, means life. So the tampura is supposed to give life.
But of course, the instrument we most associate with Indian music, with an Indian sound, is the sitar. Now, where does that fit in?
Well, the sitar is the most important Indian instrument, the most popular, I should say, of the Indian instrument. It looks marvelous, and it has 7 main strings. See, if Sheila would just play the 7 main strings. 7 main strings. 7 main strings. Then it has 13 sympathetic strings. See?
Sympathetic strings now, what does that mean?
Well, they are the strings which run under the 7 main strings. And they are tuned to the notes of the raga. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You see, that's what she's played.
But you don't actually play them as such?
No, not really, but maybe the sitarist will play that in the beginning so that the person can know what raga is being played. So if they played, they know, Multani, you see? Now, also it has 18 to 20 movable frets. Now these frets are movable so that for the tones and semitones of the ragas to be played, you see, and played with the wire plectrum.
Now, you said before that the tempura gave Indian music its life.
Yes.
But another phrase you used when we were discussing
Yes.
this whole thing before we came on air was that the tabla are the mainstream, the lifeblood of Indian music.
Absolutely.
Now tell me about these
Because that is the
drums.
rhythm, you see. Now there are two drums. It's called tabla, but there's tabla and baya. Now, the most important thing for anybody who's learning to play the drums is what they call the bowls, because the drums are spoken drums, you see. Like he learns the different syllables produced on the drums, like da, da, din.
Let's hear them. Let's hear them.
Yes. Mishra?
Like dha, dhin, ti, ti, ka, ga.
That's-
You like-
Sorry to interrupt. The thing that always impressed me and amazed me about the tabla was the amazing speed, like a downpour on a corrugated iron roof. It seemed to come so quickly.
Yeah.
Like fast ball, like
See?
two balls is very fast.
It's very impressive as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.